Hi, this is Seamless, and today I'm going to talk about a particular bit of funness you can do with FM synthesis. I haven't talked about FM synthesis in a while. It's been mostly, I've talked about it in context of other things, but I haven't done much focusing on just it. So that's what we're doing now. I'm going to also talk about a very specific thing that we can do with FM synthesis that, as well. I haven't talked about by itself. So hopefully, um, this will be a useful thing for you. So, um, basically, what we're doing right now is we're going to learn what kinds of things we can do when we modulate a high harmonic in an FM setup. And when I say an FM setup, I'm talking about a normal kind of growly FM based thing that we have been doing forever in all the how to bases. So, fundamental FM modulator. The operator 2 is modulating operator 1 100% by a triangle wave. So right now, as well, I'm going to set the modulation input amount of operator 1 to modifier x by setting the input movement here. So now this will correspond to this amount here. So that's what it sounds like when there is a fundamental tone, as in the same pitch as the output operator or carrier rather is being modulated like that. So then we're going to add a high harmonic. Now the high harmonic and the fundamental tone are actually FMing the output at the same time. Similar effects can be had if you modulate by the high harmonic and then modulate the high harmonic by a fundamental, or modulate the fundamental by the high harmonic. However, the clearest amount, the clearest version of this sound that I could think of is when they're both going in simultaneously. This is also true for FM8. If you want to make this exact same sound, like the setup would be, if you're using the default setup, you have operator F going out, mod operator F by E and also C or D or any of the operators, and then one of them is the fundamental tone, which would be set at 1 because FM8 is by default at 1. And then also the high harmonic, which would then be at 32 if we want to make the same sound as what I'm making at 64, because again, different. It's half of the normal ratio amount. So now this is what this sounds like. Fun stuff, right? So the whole point of what I'm about to tell you has to do with how this high harmonic works. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a secondary bit of modulation to just the high harmonic, and watch what happens. Actually, I'm going to make a little bit of automation here, so that it will do things without me having to mess with it. Doot, 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 doot. Let's make a small one too. Yeah. Look at them points. Cool. Anyway, watch what happens when I take a fundamental tone, as in the pitch that's at the same pitch as the outgoing carrier, and modulate the high harmonic, which is at 64. Watch what happens. And while we're absorbing that, watch what happens when that is also a triangle wave. Cool stuff, right? So, why is that being a thing that's happening? So, the high harmonic is what's causing the vocal formant business going on, and why that is something I've covered in How to Base 6 way long ago, but I will quickly talk about it again just now. So this is what it sounds like with only the high harmonic, which is actually something else that you can think of to do. Something I covered in How to Base 18, which is to create a screechy high kind of dubstep wobble that people like to use. That's one way to do it. But see how up in the high frequencies here, there's a very sharp line. There's very sharp lines going up all up in here, and then also the fundamental tone. So because that's going in there, when we FM with the fundamental, watch what happens to these lines. What happens is that the lines start to spread apart, and then and they open up and close a wider amount based on how much of this FM is engaged, and that's what creates the vocal kinds of modulation there. And that's basically why that happens. But the reason why I brought up a difference between a sine wave and a triangle wave is because a sine wave will sound like this. Actually, and a triangle wave will sound like this. Why does that happen? Well, it has to do with how the sine wave and the triangle wave are both interpreted in an FM sense. Because as it turns out, it's not actually as if it's like a really fast LFO and it's just doing the shape based on that, because as we'll find out right now, if it were the case, this would have a behavior that you would expect of a square wave. And this is something, again, I also talked about in How to Base 6, but I'm just going to review it for you right now so you don't have to go look for it. Right, because I have modulation going on. No modulate for right now, because I want to see just what this sounds like by itself. Give me my... Alright. Now that screw up has been accomplished. Okay, so let's look at what happens when you use a sine wave. So this is just a sine wave modulating another sine wave's pitch. About what you expect. This is at a really, really, really slow rate. And that's how you get, your average FM sounds. But watch what happens when I use a triangle wave. Going from the maximum pitch to the minimum pitch. And you would think, based on the shape of a triangle wave, that it wouldn't do that. That again is the kind of behavior you'd expect from a square wave. But actually, why it's doing this has to do with how the waveforms are interpreted for the purposes of FM. And it's not their shape; it's actually the slope. And why that is, we can see this is evidenced by this sine wave here, where the slope is. It's positive and it's also curving, and then it's negative and it's also curving. That's positive and it's curving, so it's curving smoothly between positive and negative, and so we get the smooth curving of sound. A triangle wave, however, doesn't change its slope. It has a slope, and then it's immediately a negative slope, and then it's a positive slope, and then it's a negative slope, negative slope, one after the other. So it means it's full on positive and full on negative. So it's full on one pitch and then full on the other. And in fact, if you were to FM using a saw wave or a square wave, pretty much nothing will happen. Because right now we're having always positive, so it's always one tone, and then just straight up no slope at all, so it's the original tone. So that's why FM is primarily triangles and sine waves. And however, in How to Base 10, I talk about a cool thing that you can actually do when you do FM a saw by another saw. It kind of makes it sound similar to an oscillator sync effect. Anyway, that whole business is why when we modulate the high harmonic by a sine wave versus a triangle wave, that the triangle wave sounds sharper. It's because it's not cycling through all the frequencies, it's only playing the top and the bottom most frequency that oscillator can perform as it's modulating the frequency of the carrier. I forgot to bring this back to the fundamental. Also, fun things you can do is that you can actually create a larger chain of modulation by modulating what's the secondary modulation of the high harmonic by another layer of modulation. And stuff. What I like to do when I use patches like this, as I do often, I will have this going on. See how I have the primary modulation mapped to mod X by this window here. So what I'll do is I'll map the modulation into the high harmonic by mod Y, so that I independently control the primary FM and then also the inclusion of the additional modulator in the high harmonic. you probably heard me use that sound 1,000 times because it's pretty easy. Like once you get that going on, it's pretty simple. And everything that I just said should be pretty doable in FM8 as well, because I'm only doing FM stuff right now. I'm not doing any kind of effects or filtering or whatever. So, and then and for as far as what I've done, every single synth that has an FM component should be able to do this if they have enough operators. So yes, I hope that was informative. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.